Showcasing local talent, professionals, and everyday people making Salt Lake City what it is today. It's time for another episode of the I Am Salt Lake podcast.
I want to welcome you guys out today to a brand new episode of the I Am Salt Lake podcast. My name is Chris Hollifield. I am your host. Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for listening. However you got here, however you're consuming, however you're listening to this, thank you so much for checking out this podcast. I got a great show for you guys today. Chase Murdock, he sat down and joined me on this episode. We sat down, we chatted, we found out about his brand new podcast that he has going on called the Utah Foodie. For those of you that do know me, you know I love listening to podcasts. You know I love discovering new shows. And when I found out about the Utah Foodie podcast, I was really, really excited. I discovered it a handful of weeks ago, and I went back and started at episode 1. I mean, this show is only about 10 episodes or so, so it's a really quick listen. Go download all the episodes and check them out. But when I found out about it and started at episode 1, I was amazed. I mean, this show started off with a bang. It was had me hooked right away. So I reached out to Chase Murdock and asked him if he would join me and sit down and chat and share his story. And had a great conversation. I'm going to be playing that here in just a minute. So hopefully you guys enjoy it. I'm going to put all the links at iamsaltlake.com/175. Get in touch with him, check out his show, and network. I mean, that's what the I Am Salt Lake podcast is all about. And really quickly, I want to thank City Home Collective for letting me use their members lounge to record this episode, for letting me use their space. Check out their website, cityhomecollective.com, if you're in the market to sell a home or buy a home. Check it out. They got a great website, great blog. I'm going to put all the links for them at iamsaltlake.com/175 as well as their Facebook. So reach out and connect with the City Home Collective. Like I mentioned, Chase Murdock's on this episode. He is the host of the Utah Foodie podcast. We have a great conversation, find out all about him. So I'm going to quit talking, and why don't you guys join me now as we chat at the City Home Collective in beautiful downtown Salt Lake City. How many episodes of the Utah Foodie have you had now?
So today is Monday. Tomorrow is our 10th episode.
That's a big step in the podcast
It is.
world.
You told me that. We were at La Barba a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
And you told me something like 90% of podcasts don't make it to episode number 10. And I've been patting myself on the back every day since coming up to this launch. It kind of feels real now, you know?
I want to get into the podcast.
Yeah.
But like we were talking about before, this is going to be in the Utah Foodie podcast feed as well as the I Am Salt Lake podcast feed. So this is going to be an opportunity. My listeners will get a chance to get to know you. Your listeners will get a chance to know you. I listen to your podcast, and I hear you do all these fantastic interviews with, different local Salt Lake City restaurants. But I want to get to know Chase Murdock, like I mentioned. So did you grow up here in Utah? Let's just jump right into a little bit of history about you. Did you grow up here in Utah?
So what's funny is I was born here. My parents both have a lot of family here in Utah. But I tell people I grew up elsewhere. I spent a lot of time moving around as a kid. I was outside of Chicago for a lot of elementary school and then moved over to New Jersey. And then finally we all came back. We moved back. I came back out with my folks. When I was kind of in junior high, almost high school, and I've been here ever since. Yeah.
To like Salt Lake City or what?
So we were in North Utah Valley, so the Alpine Highland, Cedar Hills area, kind of North Utah Valley up as you get around the point of the mountain.
At that age, what were your thoughts of Utah?
You know, I really didn't like it. I've heard. I talked to a lot of people about how they feel about being from Utah. There's a lot of Salt Lake City pride lately that I just love. Today I love Salt Lake more than almost any other city out there. I'm proud that I'm from here. I love Salt Lake. I plan on being here for a while. But at the time I didn't. To me, I missed the East Coast. I missed a lot of, diversity. My good friends all growing up were of a variety of racial background. They came from different cultures. I was the solo, small, young, scrawny white boy. And I love that, I grew up different from, I think, I have a son here. He's 3. Trying to decide, is it ideal for him to grow up in Utah? Is it ideal for him to grow up elsewhere? There's a lot of, pros and cons.
So do you remember much of the East Coast then? You said about junior high-ish.
Yeah.
So do you, it's hard for me to remember that far back.
Yeah. I'm young,
what are you?
I'm 26.
Are you? Gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't. Wow.
It's one of my best kept secrets. In fact, let's edit this out.
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding. So I'm young. I'm 26. And so for me, I feel like that's where my childhood was, or kind of I was formed, is on the East Coast. But I've been here.
Where
for
in
a
Jersey?
while.
Maybe you mentioned that. Where in Jersey?
Central, so kind of outside Princeton, New Brunswick, if you're familiar with that area.
Do you know where like Wilkes-Barre, Scranton is? I lived there for a little over 5 years. A little over 5 years.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Well, now you do. I mentioned it a couple times, but not a whole lot. So
yeah,
I moved out there.
East Coasters, we need to stick together.
About 19, because I was sick of Utah.
Were you?
I was like, I got to get out of here.
Yeah,
I got to leave.
See, that's how I was.
And so I left, and I came back, and I still wasn't the biggest fan of Utah, Salt Lake, but I was living in Provo area at the time.
Yeah.
And once you get down to Salt Lake or into Salt Lake, where up or down, wherever.
To me, I'm not certain whether I just didn't know Salt Lake like I know Salt Lake today, or whether it's changed tremendously. And I know it's changed a lot.
Oh, it's changed.
But sometimes I wonder, I have a lot of friends who live still down in Utah Valley, and I hear them kind of complain about Utah a lot. And sometimes I think that I just recently moved downtown, and I've been in Mill Creek and then Cottonwood Heights before that. And it really opened my eyes to what I think Utah meant for me, as opposed to, being in Utah Valley, where it is largely white, upper middle class, Mormon. It's, I felt like I grew up with a lot of similar backgrounds in a way that was just so different for me when I came out from New Jersey. Does that make sense? Yeah,
absolutely. So you mentioned you moved downtown, because you haven't been there very long then.
Yeah.
Obviously we're not going to tell where, but I know are we neighbors? You dropped me off where I live.
Oh, that's right. I'm 2 minutes from you. Yeah, so I work. I spend a lot of my time working out of Impact Hub on State Street.
That's where you and I met for the very first time. Oh, that's right.
How did I forget that? Yeah, of course. So if I ride my bike, probably 10 minutes. I'm still getting into the downtown lifestyle, so I have to confess I drive. But I need to. I like this idea of. I don't know. When you're in your car every day, you drive everywhere, and you tend to drive a lot. And now that I'm downtown, I'm finding.
You just walk?
I walk a lot of places.
It's beautiful.
I park, for work, and then I walk out to lunch. I walk out for dinner afterward. So I'm really kind of stepping into this downtown, quote unquote, lifestyle, and I'm loving it. It's, I'm seeing a side of Utah I haven't seen before. I'm seeing, that I really do like the city scene. Don't get me wrong. I spend a lot of time hiking, and I love the outdoors. That's what I disliked most about the East Coast. But I'm seeing a side, to Utah and to myself even that I really love in Salt Lake.
So you're a pretty big hiker then?
I like to be. I like to think I am. I got the chance to take some time off from work a lot last year, and went down to Patagonia with a buddy, and we spent 2 months backpacking in Argentina.
Excellent.
And, I knew I liked hiking before that, but man, found my love for it down there.
I'd like to get into. That's why I ask. Maybe I'll tag along one of these Utah hikes. I've only been on a couple hikes here. Believe it or not, all these years I've lived here in Salt Lake, Utah.
You know what's funny? That's the very desire that kind of drove me to hike and get outdoors more. Is I would be a couple jobs ago. I was traveling a lot for work, and when you tell people you're from Utah, right? We all know the general response that we get to that. There's a lot of Mormon response. There's a lot of the national parks. A lot of people. I was surprised to say, yeah, I've actually been out to Utah. I was down in Moab, or I was down in Zion's National Park. And I hated that I couldn't respond to that. Like, oh yeah, I know Zion's. I know it really well. I've hiked it several times. In fact, I think I'd been to Zion's once, before I had, come back to Utah and spent a lot of time recently hiking. I think we take a lot of it for granted. At least I did. I don't want to speak for everyone here, but I feel the same way that you feel is, I could
get better
10 minutes into a canyon that's just gorgeous. That's just, people would kill to go to. And I wasn't taking advantage of that. Hiking is kind of, it's an effort to get out. You
Yeah.
have to get up before it's hot. You have to have your gear. I don't know why, but have you ever done Lake Blanche?
No.
That's the one we're going to do together.
Okay.
It's up Big Cottonwood Canyon. I did that for the first time last year. The best hike in Utah, bar none. I just did Olympus 2 weeks ago. I've been kind of getting out for the first time this summer. Nothing comes close.
When you've been
to Lake
posting
Blanche.
on Snapchat.
I know.
We're Snapchat buddies.
I know. We kind of get this like little view into each
so
other's worlds
I've been
through
enjoying following you on Snapchat. Maybe you didn't want to
Likewise.
disclose that you're on Snapchat.
Oh, no.
I don't know.
You know what's funny? I'm not big into, I'm not big into social media, but I didn't get Snapchat for a long time. When it first came out, several years afterward. And to me, that was the signal that, geez, I'm now getting old. I'm no longer like in tune with these high schoolers on the latest Snapchats and on the latest social networks. But 3 months ago, I don't know when it was, I forced myself to get into it. A friend of mine, his company got bought out by Snapchat, and it's a really interesting social network that I just never understood, and I forced myself to figure it out. It's my favorite social network right now.
It's a lot of fun, especially if you can actually have a handful of people to follow. You know,
Yeah, see,
a handful of
that's the
people
problem.
that look at your posts.
Yeah.
I like it because it's not. Sometimes I feel with Instagram, it needs to be.
It needs to be perfect.
It needs to be
filtered. It needs
perfect,
to be
and you got to use the
polished.
right filter.
Yeah.
It's just like Snapchat. You just post a very
Exactly.
raw
It's
picture
raw, like
or
your
video.
life.
And, but yeah, excellent. Yeah.
Love how we're talking about Snapchat.
No,
We really digress.
and if you don't mind, I'll put your Snapchat handle, your username on the show notes for this episode. People
Deal.
can follow you and kind of, because I know you post some stuff for Utah Foodie, which we'll get into here in just a
Yeah.
minute. Your podcast that I've grown to love and
glad you said
enjoy a new episode every week. You want to talk briefly, what do you do with Impact Hub? You mentioned, what is your involvement with Impact Hub? Because that's a brand new place here in Salt Lake.
Yeah. I think when I try to describe myself, I usually start with the word entrepreneur. I used to be really resistant describing myself as an entrepreneur, but that's kind of, I think how I identify myself best, at least professionally, is my last startup was a really weird custom suit company. We were this retailer of custom suits. We had a vertically integrated manufacturing plant out in China, and we had a team of about 50 in 5 different states, and we would make and sell custom suits. And I started it in college, just clueless. I lived in the Philippines for my job before that. I lived there for about a year.
Really?
Yeah.
How was that?
It was incredible.
I can imagine.
Man, I miss that place more than any other place I've traveled to. I've never lived in another country outside of that experience. I was there a little less than a year, and I just grew to love it. If you ever are in like a checkout aisle, like Smith's or something, and you see Jennifer Aniston on this just beach that's just beautiful and empty, and
Yeah.
if you ever wonder like where is that, it's in the Philippines. I'll bet you $1 million. It's perfect. It's beautiful. It's just there's thousands of islands. I'm gonna screw this up, but I think there's like 7,000 islands, and their joke is in high tide there's 7,800, and low tide there's it's a different amount. But I grew to love it. I lived in it's a big city there, but a smaller city called Cebu in central Philippines. And when you're in the Philippines, you are an $80 flight from anywhere in Southeast Asia, anywhere in Asia, pretty much. And I was working these long hours through the week, but then on Friday, most Fridays I'd hop on a plane and get out to Ho Chi Minh City, in Vietnam, or get out to Shanghai, find my way to Bali, because I knew like this was the one chance I had to be an $80 flight from, Hong Kong. Like, wow. When do you have that chance, right? And so to kind of come full circle here, I fell in love with, 2 things. I fell in love with masks, collecting masks. I now have this weird, like, mask collection, that I get every time I travel. I collect masks. I can't describe why. And then custom suits. I fell in love with, there's a big custom suit market out there. For like $80, you can get into just this beautiful designed, handcrafted custom suit.
So you have quite a suit wardrobe then, I would imagine.
I kind of did. I fell in love with it. And then when I moved back to Utah, I had a buddy of mine, and he, we kind of convinced each other, let's import these suits and try to sell them. And, a couple of years later, we had this thriving business that, was employing several dozen people, and we raised a lot of venture capital, and, we were just growing like crazy. So anyway, so I describe myself kind of as an entrepreneur. I love, I've never really had a real 9-to-5 job in the past, 6 or 7 years. Most of my
I'm jealous.
Career. Are you?
I'm jealous right now.
Really?
Yeah.
I love it. I think entrepreneurship is seeing like this resurgence of it's an all-time high. Entrepreneurship means so many things to so many different people. And I think ultimately it inspires creatives. It allows people to really be in control of, their life, which sounds so hokey, right? But, I have a 3-year-old son. And I really want to prioritize how I spend time with him. And when you work a traditional 9-to-5 job, that's really hard to do. It gives you just a lot of creativity. I can sleep in on a morning if I'm feeling groggy and work late into the night. Or I can, I like going out for breakfast sometimes, so I'll do that. I don't know. I'm not describing it very well, but it's the ability to play to your strengths and to really live a good flexible life, if that makes sense.
Well, absolutely. When you're your own boss, you're in control. You work harder, you make more. If you don't.
And importantly, beyond all that, most importantly, when you're doing work that you find important and meaningful to yourself, you put your best foot forward every single day without fail. And you see kind of the best side of you emerge, in a way that's really fulfilling and really fun to challenge yourself and kind of see yourself, kind of put yourself out there. So, I have a lot of friends who get into startups for the first time and they start their own business, and always without fail, they'll say something like, I'm seeing a side to myself I didn't realize I had, whether it's like skill set or just personality, or, you really get to live your full potential in a way that a traditional cubicle or office job doesn't generally allow you to, if that makes any sense.
It makes a lot of sense.
So with Impact Hub, Impact Hub to me, I think represents a lot of things that like I just want to be a part of. Like it's a co-working space, which means it's kind of like a gym membership, but for your work. So I think it's like 15,000 square feet in this beautiful building on 150 South State Street. I'm not affiliated with it really.
No.
I sound like I'm selling it here. I feel like I have to backpedal. I'm a big fan of like what they represent. It's I think they have 200 to 300 members, and they're all entrepreneurs, social entrepreneurs. They run a nonprofit. Uber's main office is in Impact Hub.
When I was visiting that day with Ryan, Ryan Semenka, another friend of mine, not Ryan Prince, who's missing here, by the way, guys.
Where'd he go?
So I apologize for those of you that were expecting him on this episode. I don't know where he's at today, but so Ryan Semenka wanted to show me the place, and I went down there, and I was like, oh, Uber's here. This is great, because we were, kind of even looking into maybe doing some of the podcast recordings out of there.
Oh, that'd be a good idea.
That's what Ryan was hoping for. And then you were there.
Yeah. And that's where I met you for the first time.
The brilliant thing about that is I was like, I recognize that voice because I've been listening to your
that's
podcast.
That's the first time anyone's ever said that to me. This is a moment
you're going to get more of it. Keep doing your podcast. It happens to me, so.
Well, it's funny. When I sat down with you over coffee, or no. Actually, when we met I had a similar moment where it's like, I know this face much more than I know you. And it's almost, you build this where, like, I got into radio and podcasting a couple of years ago. Just, I'm a huge consumer of podcasts, as you probably are.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel like I have this really intimate relationship with like Ira Glass or Alex Bloomberg and, these folks who I've just listened to for years.
And that's the way it should be.
It is, but it's really awkward, I'll bet, when you meet them if you ever meet them for the first time. It's like, I feel like I know you and love you, to them, and they don't even know who you build this weird, like one-sided relationship.
So let's actually jump into, I want to talk, about your podcast.
Yeah.
You mentioned, I want to pick your brain on some podcasts here in the future or in a little bit, kind of some of your favorites, kind of, what you're listening to. But so the Utah Foodie. Excellent podcast, by the way. Like I mentioned in the beginning, I'm going to put all the links on the show notes for this. Go check it out. How it comes out once a week. Do you have like what date is it?
Tuesday.
Every Tuesday. Yeah. You do a great job of that, by the way. Every week, new episode. One of the best things I could recommend to people doing a podcast is very, very scheduled.
Thank you.
People. What inspired you? What made you? At what point did you say, "Oh, I need to do a podcast"? I mean, talk about that story a little bit.
I wish I could say it's that I'm this diehard foodie who knows every restaurant and every restaurateur in Utah, and it was just a no-brainer for me. It's not that. I wish I could say that's what it was. For me, again, I see myself as this. I love creating new things. I love taking an idea and watching it through kind of fruition. And what I saw happening, that I still see happening, is two really massive trends. One is podcasting. Podcasts are bigger than they've ever been before. It's growing tremendously month over month. Podcasts have kind of turned into Reddit of like, there's a Reddit for everything. There's a subreddit for every single desire or pastime or interest out there, whether it's business, watching cat videos, or, anything in between. And podcasting is really turning into that world. Is if you care a lot about cars, you can find hundreds of great car podcasts. If you care about business or startups or entrepreneurship, there's that. If you care about restaurants, there's that.
Or Salt Lake City.
Or Salt Lake City.
This gives, an opportunity to get to know people in Salt Lake.
Exactly. Is what you're doing. And so, I love that it's this kind of, the podcasts don't have to be big. The podcasts are really just hobbyists kind of coming together. And I love that idea. And I love that I'm seeing more and more of my friends find podcasts that they just love and listen to religiously. So that was one trend. The other trend, that I'm still just so fascinated by is Utah is going through some really exciting, kind of changes, and it's not reforming, but it's forming in a way that I think is exciting for anyone living in Utah. Is we are creating and shaping the destiny of Utah as you and I talk, as we build and go out into, our community and engage. The I Am Salt Lake podcast is just a staple for Salt Lake City residents and people who want to get to know Utah within their own state, but people from outside of this. And I just love that. So the second thing is, just our food culture is really elevating. We're getting some just tremendous restaurants, some great coffee shops, really awesome bars, food trucks, surprisingly. It's just this bubbly.
Well, there's always a new one popping up.
There is. It's
a new
amazing.
Restaurant,
I can't
or
even keep up.
A new food truck, or a new.
There is.
Whatever.
There is.
Cafe, whatever.
And what I love about, I don't know. I think what I love is that there's also this growing group of kind of self-proclaimed foodies. I'm one of them. I'm not a foodie. I just enjoy going out. I love getting to know new places. I love getting to know the owners behind them. I love learning about their menu. I love when I try something and it just, legitimately kind of blows my mind. I love a dish. I'll get really excited about, when a restaurant offers a dish I love. And I love this discovery and kind of cultish following that I think our food scene has. So to me, it was like, first, where is there a podcast where I can go and learn about the Utah food scene? There wasn't one. Don't get me wrong, there's tons of restaurants, there's tons of there's Food Critics, there's, City Weekly and Slug and all these publications, they have food sections and they're great, right? But to me, and this is the thesis and the driving force behind the Utah Foodie, there's no underlying storytelling behind what I think is one of the hardest businesses there is, which is the food business. It sucks. It's awful. The margins are just razor thin. It's super competitive. Diners, you and me, we're super critical when, a restaurant's slow at bringing something out. It's a really hard, unrelenting business. And to me, that presented, I think, two scenarios, kind of jokingly. One is either it's just filled with crazy people who just, why would you go into it by choice? You'd have to be crazy. Or second, and this is what I'm finding it is, just tremendously passionate and just craft-focused, motivated individuals that are just fascinated. And there's no storytelling or no available venue for people to hear those stories. So you have all these foodies that are intrigued by, Current opened. God, if I could have eliminated that off my Facebook feed, it would have saved me half my posts. Everyone just lit up over this new place and, the blogs and the websites, all over Current, this great new restaurant downtown.
I still haven't been there.
Have you not?
No.
Is it
beautiful inside?
It's gorgeous inside.
Outside, I like the look of it.
Outside's cool. I love the flame, the fire they have going. So anyway, I mean, to me, it's this, the Utah Foodie is this collision of a lot of things I'm just super passionate about. It's, podcasts. I didn't get podcasts. How do you make a podcast? How do you produce a podcast? What makes a good podcast? What makes a good interview? And then second is the food scene. Where is the food scene going? And how do we put a voice and story behind the passionate people within that industry?
So this is your first podcast then?
Yeah.
The Utah Foodie is your very first podcast. No, you weren't on any other podcast prior, no experience.
Yeah.
Well, you came out with a bang. I mean, your first episode, I think so. Yeah, well, you're welcome.
Like everything though, and I'm super critical of myself, so I need to be cautious, but, like everything though, I look back and man, my first few episodes, they make me cringe. But
that's
and I've heard you say the same thing.
Well, mine do as well. I mean,
and I think that's kind of,
but because you know what to listen for, you know what to, you know what was going on when you were recording it, or maybe a word you said instead of another word. And I do the same thing. It's so easy
to nitpick yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I still do it to this day. I'll put it out there and I'll be like, oh, something, the recording didn't come out well, or this or that.
Yeah. And that's how I am.
And nobody else hears it except myself.
And that's what people tell me. But I would have gone into journalism, I think, had I not gotten into startups. I love and I appreciate more than anything else a really good interview. To me, that's an art, is when you're able to, and seriously, I take notes from you in your episodes. Like, it's not literally, but you do a great job really like bringing, I think a good interviewer is able to, they have this X factor ability to bring out just great stories and to help them navigate their own stories in a way that makes sense for the listener. And it's storytelling in a weird passive way. It's like you have to help them tell their story. And oftentimes your guests aren't good storytellers. And you kind of have to like pull it out of them. But
it's because they're not used to being behind the microphone. And they have no idea what to expect.
It's true.
Just like even you today, you probably have no idea what to expect from me.
And we are in a venue that I am just madly in love with. I didn't know what to expect. I'm envious of your setup. We're in City Home Collective right now.
Yeah, beautiful spot. Thank you so much to the City Home Collective for letting us record here.
It's amazing. It feels like we're down in the Rest, below Bodega. That bar down there. Do you know that place?
I love that place.
This place, the candles are lighting it and nothing else. The leather tufted couches. But so I'm out at KRCL,
which I want to get into. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I want to get into that. But hang tight just 1 second before we jump into that. So you were talking about kind of interviews and storytelling, and how this is your first podcast. What was the very first podcast you listened to then? Like, how did you even find out about podcasts?
To me, public radio was my gateway drug to podcasts.
So like NPR stuff, Fresh Air.
I would listen to, definitely NPR over KUER here in Utah, on my way in and out of work. Catching shows that don't even resemble podcasts, like,
just anything with talk radio.
Yeah.
I mean, you're a man after my own heart.
Yeah.
I got burned out of music. I wanted to listen to talk radio.
Show, is where I really fell in love with like good radio. I don't know what my first podcast was, but to me it was kind of a stepping stone out of like music into, public radio, good reporting, and then good storytelling, and then podcasts, I think is what it was. I don't know.
Cause that's what I want to have that lead into, kind of how you got set up with KRCL. So you decided to do a podcast. What was the first thing you did? Like just started reading about it or I mean, what kind of challenges did you face in the beginning?
Yeah, that's a good question. A lot of challenges. I think what's funny is I brought up the idea of the Utah Foodie with a bunch of friends over drinks like about a year ago.
And what did they think?
They liked the idea. It was like, yeah, this is a good idea. And to me, it was like, yeah, that's a fun idea. It would be fun to do. And I left it at that and didn't really think about it very much until not 6 to 8 weeks before my first episode. I was sitting, this is funny, this wasn't on purpose. I was sitting at the Rest below Bodega, over drinks with a couple friends after work. And, I can't remember who it was, but he brought up, wanting to know the owner of the Rest a little bit better because, it's such an interesting atmosphere, and it would have to be such an interesting person to create such an interesting atmosphere. And to me, it just clicked. It was like, oh, that's kind of what got me excited about the idea of the Utah Foodie. And, I was thinking about, why not just do it? And I was really thinking kind of like how you started off. Why not just record it on my iPhone? I'm sure the audio is not awful. And I was a guest on a podcast a couple weeks before that. The E-Journey, the entrepreneurial journey. Shout out to them. One, yeah. It's two local guys down in Utah Valley, and they record out of Beehive Startups and Izeni's podcasting studio. And it's just a weekly podcast where they highlight different entrepreneurs and tell their journey, as their name kind of suggests. And I walked away, no offense to them, I was like, that wasn't that hard. Like, they're great at what they do, of course, but they're not professionals. None of us are professionals, and that's the beauty of podcasting. Is it's this like amateur revolution. That's the buzzword of, I don't know. That's the
we're just
the most
overgrown
overstated
kids
way.
playing playing talk
that's
radio
exactly
in
how
our
it feels
basements.
Like. It's like we're kids, like playing grown up, like running our own Talk of the Nation show. I'm Neil Conan.
Yeah.
So I think it was a number of factors. It was just like, one is I'd love to do something like this. I'm trying to get better connected with folks here in Utah and really be a part of the community. I was a guest on a podcast. And then third is, these guys were like, yeah, this would be an awesome podcast. I would listen to it all the time. And so I sent an email out to a bunch of friends and said, hey, thinking of this podcast idea. Here's the basic premise. How in the world would I go about recording it and really getting that all done? Would I have to go and buy equipment and, get out a few $1,000 or a few $100? Are there podcasting studios like for free to use or for cheap? And on that email was Laura Jones, at KRCL. She, I wish I knew her title. I think she's program director. She runs a lot of the programming at KRCL. And she was on that email and she said, hey, this is interesting to us. Come on by. Let's have you meet some of the folks here and maybe we can strike a deal. She knew I needed podcasting space. I knew or had a sense that they wanted good content for free, cheap, free. And so we struck a deal where, I just record for free out of their studio. And in exchange, I give them rights to little 3-minute snippets of my episode that goes live on 90.9 FM KRCL, a couple times a week. So for them, it's great because if you're in radio right now, you're really trying to figure out, like, how do we make money? How do we produce good quality radio? The answer isn't what it was yesteryear, which is hire a lot of great journalists and a lot of great editors. And it's really, how do we do more with less? And so this is an interesting model that I think KRCL is experimenting with, is how do we get great podcasts where they have a need for a studio like I did, and get some of their content up on our radio program.
So you mentioned 3-minute snippets, you said? So they don't play the whole episode of Utah Foodie.
I'm not that good.
Really? Well, I think it's good enough for them to, noon on Saturdays at noon.
I'd love to see them do that. We right now edit out 3 minutes, what they find to be or what we find to be interesting minutes out of the interview.
But I bet you that gets new listeners to the podcast.
It does. So it's a win-win, truly, for all of us. That drives some listenership for me. It really kind of adds to the breadth of what they offer at KRCL, right? They're a for us, by us community radio program. And the Utah Foodie is such a perfect fit for that. So it's a true win-win. Like, seriously, it was a deal struck wonderfully.
I'd love to come out. I've actually never been to KRCL.
Come on out.
Believe it or not.
Do you know where it is?
Roughly.
It's way out there. It's on North Temple, but
it's really far west,
2000
right?
west.
Yeah. No, I'd love to come out there and check out your studios, because I bet you have just top of the line microphones compared to what I got set up here.
Well, there's pros and cons to both, right? Like, they have great equipment, but I feel a lot more casual sitting here with you than I do when I'm in my studio. It feels very.
Why is that?
We're all kind of sitting upright in these chairs over a mixing board in front of really big, expensive microphones. It's very formal. And this, by stark contrast, is wonderful. We're sitting, in the City Home Collective. There's mics and it's professional, right? It feels professional, but it feels a lot more casual, the way I think a podcast ought to. I'm not complaining by any means.
No, thank you very much. And that's what I'm going for with this, is because it goes back to, I want people to open up. I want to find out your story, and I want to have it in a relaxed setting where you do feel like you can open up.
Totally.
Because sometimes I think a lot of those radio studios, and I've actually been told this by people that have come on the show, where they say, knowing that this isn't live, I feel like I could be a lot more relaxed. There's some, even though it will go up at some point, because there's something about live radio where it's like, oh my gosh, what if I say the wrong thing, or what if I accidentally swear or something?
What's funny is I feel that for sure when I so I have to record my intros, right? As you do. I have 2 or 3 minutes at the beginning where I kind of introduce who the guest is, kind of just talk about random, stuff. I talk too much in those intros. I need to really get good at consolidating.
You do a great job.
But even myself, I find myself re-recording those all the time, as I get nervous.
The intros.
Even though it's just me in the studio alone, right?
Yeah.
I'm not like nervous, like shaking, but it's just like you feel pressure. Even though that's not live, I think it's one step closer. You feel this pressure that right now I don't feel with you here in this podcast, because there's something about it that really lets your guard down in a way that I don't think you get with live radio.
So recording your intro, you get a little more nervous?
I kind of do.
No, I get that way. You don't want me to give you a tip? Put a picture of somebody in front of you. Because it's the thing of that you're talking to nobody. And so you're just sitting there, because there's something
it's
brilliant
like you're talking to yourself
about the podcaster that can record by himself. You know, I don't know if you ever listen to Bill Burr, Monday morning podcast. It's just him rambling. But I actually listened to this on a podcast. If you put a picture of somebody in front of you when you're recording solo, it's like you have somebody to talk to.
It's kind of weird, but I'll try it.
Try it. Maybe it won't work for you.
I'll try that.
But I get exactly what you mean.
Yeah.
So you've done 10 episodes, or roughly. You have your 10th one coming out here shortly. Let's talk about some of the people you've had on your podcast.
Yeah,
so people listening that might not be familiar with the Utah Foodie. Who are a few? Or I mean, shoot, you haven't. It's not like you've had hundreds, I guess, at this point. But I mean, who have you had on your show?
So I tried to make an effort to come out with a bit of a bang in terms of the guest lineup. Is I think the future for the Utah Foodie isn't going to always be the restaurants that you recognize right off the bat. I want a lot of it to be discovering great hole-in-the-wall locations that you wouldn't have thought of trying before. But I think to really come out with a bang, we made an effort to get some really top-notch people in. So we kicked it off with Whiskey Street, Jason Lecates and Matt Crandall. They own and run Bourbon House, and did just a magnificent job getting that off the ground, that they had a lot of experience and cash to go in with Whiskey Street in a way that I don't feel like any other cocktail bar in Utah has really been approached. It's very kind of high end, upper end, I should say. They put a lot of money into it, and to my knowledge, it's the fastest growing, most successful cocktail bar that Utah's ever seen in its first year and a half. So that we kicked off with them, followed up with Forage, without a doubt, the most innovative and one of the best restaurants in Utah, Forage restaurant. And then we're all over the map. We've done, just last week that launches tomorrow, I'm sorry, the episode that launches tomorrow. It's a smaller place, but it was my favorite interview I've done yet. It was with Black Sheep Cafe.
Down in Provo.
Have you been there?
I haven't, but I've heard it's great.
It is fantastic.
I've heard
when I lived in Orem, I went there all the time. They have these Navajo tacos that are incredible. But what I found to surprise me and be just really interesting, and again, just more evidence that I just love what I'm doing, is it's such a pleasure to sit in this seat and interview these, really interesting, passionate people. He's part Navajo and comes from a Native American background. And he talked a lot about his, kind of desire to bring Native American cuisine back into the United States kind of popular world.
Yeah.
And he's so passionate about that. And so we really just went into that, what drives him and how he crafts his menu, what foods he likes, why Native American food isn't as popular as other cuisines. So again, the Utah Foodie isn't always going to be about the name brand places. We've done a lot of great name brand places, even Stevens, Squatters, right? But I think the best storytelling is going to be found not with the top shelf restaurants and bars and coffee shops, but rather these passionate, kind of under-recognized, just awesome places all around the state.
Well, they have some of the most fascinating stories because, everybody's struggled. I mean, and back to, like you said, the food industry is a very tough industry to be involved in. So they've all had their struggles and whatnot. But, no, I'm eager to see kind of, where the podcast goes. Cause you've only seen a small bit of it.
Yeah.
It will kind of form into its own thing. I mean, even when I started this podcast, I had a little bit different idea of it, and then I've kind of watched it go in different directions over the last couple of years. But it kind of takes on its own form. How was it like in the beginning? Did you find much of a struggle when you would contact these places and they had no idea what a podcast even was?
You know what's funny is I sent a pretty big email out to 20, 25 people I kind of shortlisted as folks I would just be tickled to interview. Mm-hmm. And of those, 95% responded back almost immediately, eager to participate.
Really?
And I think the reason for that is there truly is no storytelling medium for these people. and I say these people like they're some distant, like if you're slaving away in the food business, there's very little opportunity to kind of pat yourself on the back and pause and say like, it's incredible how far we've come. And I love what I'm doing, and I love, and so I think that was a part of it. I don't know, everyone wants to kind of broadcast themselves. I think one of the biggest issues I'm having right now with the Utah Foodie is I think I initially, because I had no idea and still have no idea what I'm doing. I got some feedback that the first few episodes kind of came off as an advertisement for the restaurants and bars and coffee shops I was interviewing.
Really? And
no one wants to listen to an advertisement for half an hour to an hour. So I'm really trying to figure out how do I get into the storytelling without letting them, if you ask, the chef, the executive chef behind their restaurant, like their favorite menu item, they'll go on for an hour talking about how great their menu is and how great their food is, right? And you don't want that, but you don't not want that. So I'm trying to find the right balance between that, if that makes sense. I don't know really what that right balance is, but, I echo what you're saying is I don't know where the Utah Foodie is headed.
Yeah. Where would you like to see it go?
That's, I've thought about this.
I mean, do you have a direction you would like to see it? Because I know we chatted when we met for coffee a few weeks ago.
What's funny is
we chatted kind of about that.
Yeah, I tell people, and I told people, and I still tell people that if the Utah Foodie only had 10 listeners every week forever and it wasn't growing, I would still do it. I love it. I have a lot of fun with it.
See, and I said that in the beginning too.
Did you?
But there's something nice to know.
You're right.
A lot of
people
people listen to it, and you're like, that's really cool. And to see those listenerships go up, and to see the tweets, and to see the Facebook comments, and the shares on Facebook.
Yeah.
It's such a nice reward, because the podcast takes a lot of time and effort, as you know.
It
put a lot of
more
hours.
time than I realized it would.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay? So you say it takes more time than you realized. What's something that you didn't expect?
Editing, man, it kills me. I hate editing. I don't edit my podcast in the middle.
Okay. So the interview part you don't edit. Boom.
I don't touch that. I knew that if I even opened that can of worms, I would go down a rabbit hole forever trying to edit out. I say a lot. I shouldn't say this, because every person I've told that, they'll listen to me when I talk or something, and then they'll count or something. And I say a lot. And when I go back and listen to my episodes, it's like, geez, man.
And see, and I used to cut all those out, and then it's like, I
know if I started that, I would get so nitpicky. I'm kind of OCD, and I won't even let myself go into that.
Yeah.
But when I say editing, I mean so I have to put together those 3-minute clips for KRCL, right?
Okay.
Man, that's a nightmare for me.
Really?
I hate it. I'm not an editor. I don't like editing. I'm not good at it. I don't enjoy it. And so to me, that's like the slave labor, the hard work of the podcast. I have fun every minute I'm in that interview. I'm loving it. Every minute I'm editing, I'm like regretting my decision to do this every single second. The good news is, I just brought on a part-time kind of volunteer producer, who's going to help me with a lot of that editing, and to really, give a little bit of creative direction that I can't provide into, a lot of our listeners have said, we'd love to hear something out of the kitchen, or, get out on site. I know you do some of that. And there are some podcasts I love that they're not confined to the four walls of their podcast studio, and that allows it to go deeper and further than I think I'm currently going. So there's, a lot of room for us to improve, and we're pursuing that.
And that's the beautiful thing about a podcast is every episode really could be so different.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, if it's in the same subject matter, but you have so much creative freedom with podcasting.
It's really true.
What is something that you wished that you would have known in the beginning? Like, say somebody in Utah or Salt Lake is wanting to start a podcast. What is something that you wished you would have known?
I think there's still a huge opportunity. There's and this is kind of my entrepreneur crazy brain coming out, but there's two kind of worlds that need to be bridged. And most importantly, the first is a lot of people could be and want to be and should be running podcasts, but aren't, because studio space is really hard to find. And not everyone like you is willing to go out and spend a few $100 on great equipment. It's really hard to do. And then the second is this audience, this group of people who, again, to me, podcasting, it's such a stupid metaphor, but podcasting to me is kind of what Reddit's become, is there is a podcast for everyone. And I love the idea of having these small micro communities of podcast creators and listeners connecting on a global, scale where there's, folks who are super interested with sewing in India, listening to this podcast, this woman in Ireland, creating this podcast about sewing, of just bridging this world of just people who are so passionate about something that to me, it's like, I would never listen to a sewing podcast, but who cares? That's not what it's intended for. There's a variety of interests all around the world and this ability for podcasts to kind of bring everyone kind of together around that.
In that community, who the listeners. Yeah. Well, and that goes back to, like you were saying, you don't care if there's 10 people listening because, and in all reality, there's a lot of truth behind that because I would rather have 10 passionate listeners than 100,000 people that just download it and skim through it. And I don't know. You kind of, I listen to your podcast, but because I think it helps me get to know Salt Lake better. I think that it helps me, kind of, not meet people, right? Again, you have this weird relationship where like you feel like you know people after you've listened to them. I feel like I get to meet people. For example, we're sitting in the basement of City Home Collective. When you did Cody Derrick's episode, I hadn't met him or really known of him prior to, and that's one cool guy. He is.
He's just so awesome. And I followed him on Facebook and, or not on Facebook, on Instagram. And, I don't know. It really helps me get to know my city and my community better. And, you're not going to be this massive, top 100 podcast. It's not intended to, right? We're not WTF.
I want to put WTF under, that's my goal. No, I'm kidding.
But like both you and I, and this is what I find interesting is I'm the Utah foodie. I'm not, I have already set my ceiling, right? Utah only has 3.5 million people. And it's not like all of them are going to listen. This isn't intended to be a high scale, massive enterprise. And neither is I Am Salt Lake. Right?
But I'm sure people outside of Utah listen to your podcast.
You think?
Oh, absolutely. I know people listen to this, people that have moved away. People that still want to be in touch. Like I mentioned before, people moving here, they want to, they want to invest. If I was moving to a new city, I would do an iTunes search and, let's see if there's a podcast about Chicago, or let's see if there's a podcast, about Salt Lake. I'm going to move there. I want to find out about, and it's a great resource. They're going to find your podcast and find out about some, places to eat. Let's talk about that. Let's, how I like to bring that up on the podcast. It might be kind of tough in your position since you do talk to restaurants. Is that cord? But do want me to move that? Is that cord?
Oh, you're good. You're good. I'm just readjusting.
Okay. I didn't want to make sure.
No, you're fine.
What are some of your favorite places to eat? I guess, or is that a tough one since you've interviewed probably a handful already? If not all of them that you've talked to are probably your favorites.
Yeah, it's tough because I like so many different places for so many different reasons. I can get pretty good about it if I have a category. If you say breakfast, right? Which is one of my favorite kind of categories. There's a place in Mill Creek, called Lazy Day Cafe. Very few people have heard of it. I went there for brunch. Did you?
I used to go there quite a bit.
What did you have? Which place are you thinking? You're not thinking over-the-counter cafe, are you? A lot of people confuse those two. So Lazy Day.
I'm pretty sure it was when I used to live in the Sugar House area.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So it's on 33rd, and it's Highland-ish.
Yeah.
Minus 4 blocks.
Yeah.
And it's tucked away in this little strip mall, and they have these lemon pancakes that are mind-blowingly good. They have this syrup that comes out, and I always order 2 of the syrup. I'm this awful person who's going to have diabetes in a couple of years. Their breakfast is incredible. And, it's not the Park Cafe. It's not this place that's just, slammed. They get busy on the weekends, but it's this secret little Mill Creek find that, man, I love.
Well, now it's going to be overpacked and busy because you're talking about it here.
Yeah. So I don't know if you kind of, if I'm in the mood for sushi, right? I have my top go-to places where it's Takashi, you can't beat. It can compete in New York, right? Sapa, however, really good. I love their atmosphere. I love the people there. Sapa is one of my favorite sushi places in Salt Lake. So it's hard for me to just come out and say this is what, it depends on the category, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know.
What, so living here in Salt Lake,
yeah,
you've lived here for a while, and this again is a standard question I ask most people that come on the show. Say somebody was listening and they're going to visit Salt Lake. What is one or two things you would say? You got to check this out. You got to experience this, visit it. Something you have to do while you're in Salt Lake area.
So yeah, my initial response would be to get initially out of the city and get out in the mountains
and go do some hiking.
The hiking here is second to none. I mean, I lived, in my last neighborhood, I was, 5 minutes from Mill Creek Canyon. Some of the best hikes in Utah are up there, or up Big Cottonwood. We have views, we have lakes, we have just this, scenery that's just really hard to beat. And it's not just that it's second to none, it's how close it is to the city.
Yeah.
If you live in, Seattle, right? You're close to forest, you're close to mountains, but it's a hike to get out of the city and go get to them. In Salt Lake, I loved that I could be in my office in 15 minutes, or I could be up, starting my hike on Grandeur Peak, in 15 minutes. That's rare. You could be up on the slopes, in 20, 30 minutes, depending on where you live. So, I would say take full advantage of that. Get down to Moab, get down to Zion's National Park, get down to the Narrows. I love Park City. I think Park City is one of our most treasured kind of pieces of Utah.
It's an interesting area.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
And you go up there, the air is fresh.
It is.
And, even if I'm not a big skier or snowboard guy, do you ski or snowboard?
I used to a lot
really?
more. I haven't in a few seasons.
Yeah. And, so I don't go up there a whole lot in the wintertime. But, do you ever get to Park Silly, the Sunday market?
I've got a buddy who has a booth up there.
Really?
Snowy Awesome. His name's Adam. And I meant to go up yesterday, but didn't. I think
it just started for the season.
It did. I think they're 2 weeks in.
Yeah.
I could be wrong.
So, it's great. We got Saturday, we got the downtown farmers market here. Go up to Park City for Park Silly on Sundays. Yeah. It's great. And there's so much going on here. Especially with summer here in Utah.
Summer in Salt Lake. Oh, there's nothing like it.
What are some of your favorite things about summertime here?
I love the farmers market. I look forward though, to the Arts Fest every year.
Coming up, actually, I think this will go up, this is going to go up. Yeah, this will be up right before Utah Arts Fest. It's coming up next weekend. Great. So
yeah, I've gone, I think now 5 years in a row. I wouldn't miss it. I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's so many things. But the farmers market's great.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's now that you're right downtown, I don't know exactly where you're at, because we obviously don't want any stalkers after you, Chase. But hopefully you can get there. It just started last week, and I was able to just walk right across the street.
There's nothing like that.
And visit.
I love being downtown.
Well, so you got a new episode comes out every Tuesday. Utah Foodie. It's on iTunes. Are you on Stitcher Radio?
We are.
Pretty much everywhere you probably can find podcasts.
Yeah. Anywhere you
check it out. It's been an honor to sit here and chat with you.
No, thank you. Seriously, the pleasure's mine. And I don't just say that. I love you are, I think, my baseline of, I've got to go listen to Chris's podcast and see if we're stacking up. I love, listening to your episode, and it kind of pushes me to keep.
They're interesting sometimes. I know they're all over the place.
You know what I envy? I envy that you have the ability to interview almost whoever you please.
Yeah.
I don't really have, since I've gotten into interviewing, I'll have these moments where I'm like, that guy or gal would be super interesting to interview. It's that wouldn't fit in the Utah Foodie scope.
Do you ever see yourself doing another podcast?
I've thought about it, to be honest.
Because I haven't
voiced it yet. But
thought about doing a podcast, something that would even. If I wanted to talk to somebody that wouldn't be even, Utah related.
That'd be cool.
That'd be really cool. Even do some phone interviews, even do some Skype interviews.
I've got a friend, Devin Thorpe. He just does Google Hangout calls with people all over the world. And the audio isn't fantastic, right? It's not as good as yours or mine because we're using professional mics, and he's just on Google Hangout. And usually his guest is using their Apple, headphones and mic. So it's not high quality, but it's not awful. Yeah. It's, and so again, the bar is really low when it comes to creating a good podcast. It comes down to content first and not audio quality, which I love. I love that it's just, if you can produce a good podcast, people will listen.
Absolutely. Well, before we close out here, how can people find you?
So we're at the utahfoodie.com. And that is the show. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at the Utah Foodie. Cool shout out to Kenny Nelson. Thank you for running our social media. She's great. She's over at Friendemic, and she's a friend, and she just runs for free, for fun, the Utah Foodie. I'm Chase Murdock on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. So just at Chase Murdock.
Do you care if I put like your personal
No, of
Facebook
course. Yeah,
link
I'd love
on
to.
the show notes and people?
I'd love to.
Because that's one thing I like with this show is the personal interactions and,
Yep.
and personal friendships for people to create and develop.
Love it.
Even like yourself and I mean, if it wasn't for this podcast, I would have never
See, that's
probably
what I
had an
love about it.
opportunity.
That's what I
to
love about this
sit
podcast
down
stuff. You
and-
get to meet
yeah.
some really interesting people, and again, you have the upper edge on me with that. I think you have a really wide net of people you can meet with, and I envy that quite a bit.
Well, thanks a lot, Chase.
Thanks, Chris.
I've like I said, it's been an honor sitting and chatting with you.
Likewise, thanks.
All right, many thanks goes out to Chase Murdock. Thank you so much for coming on this episode. Had a great time chatting with you. Again, all of the show notes can be found at iamsaltlake.com/175. Let Chase know you heard him on this episode. Let him know what you think. Connect with him. Subscribe to his podcast. Love what he has going on, and I hope to collaborate with him on some different projects in the future. Again, the website iamsaltlake.com is where you can find the entire back catalog, all 175 episodes of the I Am Salt Lake podcast. Make sure to subscribe in iTunes, Stitcher Radio, however you consume podcasts, as I have a brand new episode each and every week. There are a few ways you can help keep the show alive. You can tell your family and friends about your favorite episodes. Share any of your favorite episodes on any social media sites. Also, make sure to leave a review in iTunes if you have not done so. That helps the podcast immensely. Also, there's a donate button at iamsaltlake.com where you can donate $1 or $2. Helps keep the show moving forward. Helps with the web hosting, the audio hosting, any new equipment that I may need to purchase. $1 or $2 goes a long ways. I'm going on 3 years of doing the I Am Salt Lake podcast, and I want to thank each and every one of you for your continual support, for the donations, for the emails, for the tweets. It means so much to me. Thank you so much, each and every one of you. Like I said, I got a brand new show each and every week. Make sure you subscribe. That way you don't miss it. And you guys get out and enjoy the city. Hopefully you guys are enjoying it. It's summertime here in Salt Lake City. So there's a lot to do. No complaining of nothing to do. All right. I'm here next week with a brand new episode. And until then, thank you so much for everything. You guys are awesome. Have a great week.